Welcome. I wish that the Chen family were here because they're responsible for this glorious exhibition. They left for a trip to India last night, but I just want to acknowledge Joel, Margaret, Fiona, and Bianca Chen, who embraced this scholarship mission and put on this great show. And as you can see, they spared no expense in putting this exhibition together, and it's a great Getty Pacific Standard Time participating gallery show, and it's the 7th Chen exhibition. Being architectural historians, you know all about Charles and Ray Eames. Charles was trained as an architect, and Charles, in an oral history at the end of his life, said that Ray is an architect by osmosis now. So it's wonderful to welcome all of you here. I'll just say one general thing about Charles and Ray Eames, and I'll try to drop in a few architectural references in your honor. A couple of years ago, the U.S. Post Office decided to honor Charles and Ray's accomplishments, and their accomplishments are so varied, it took them 16 stamps to do that. And I looked it up last night online, and they've only done 4 Frank Lloyd Wright stamps. And that gives me a chance to tell you one little story, because Charles did attend the Washington University School of Architecture, and after a couple of years was asked to leave. And there's various accounts of this, but one of them was a premature interest in the work of Frank Lloyd Wright. And in my forthcoming book, which is an anthology of their speeches and writings, though, we'll really drill down into that, because Charles made it clear that he liked what Frank Lloyd Wright wrote about and what Frank Lloyd Wright said. So how this collection came to be, from 1987 to 4 years ago, I had accumulated 175 Eames pieces, and my storage bills were higher than my rent. And Joel and Margaret Chen agreed to buy the collection with some very nutty conditions, but they think about things other than just making money, and they embrace the scholarship mission. And I said, if you buy my collection, then you have to let me study it the way Charles and Ray recommended studying anything, through the lens of a camera, and you have to pay for the photographer, let me pick the photographer, and shoot it in this forensic way. And they completely embraced that, and they took it one step further. Originally, it was going to be studying the 175 and giving me the photos for a new online Eames encyclopedia, which is sponsored by the Eames office. That's Eames.Designs.com. But then Joel got as excited about Eames as me, and when he saw that the 175 didn't represent the entire body of work, we started growing the collection. So it grew in 4 years from 175 to 450. And you can see the 6,000 photographs that the Chens contributed to public design scholarship on Eames.Designs.com. The exhibition designers, who are local artists, Claire Graham and Bob Breen, went through them and chose to feature the underside photos, because that's the part of the chair you can't see when it's on pedestals. And I'll make a little reference to that. But it's wonderful to have photos, because then these are high resolution, and we can learn more and more about the designs from the photographs. And also, in reference to the stamps, this is not just a furniture exhibition. The Chens embrace the whole Eames body of work. You can see Eames films here. You can see examples of their graphic design. You can see examples of their exhibition design. You can even see examples of their architecture. That kiosk up there is a real Charles and Ray Eames building, which we'll talk about briefly. 3 ideas that I'm going to focus on. The first is this great Charles Eames quote. In the 1970s, Hugh Dupree, the chairman of Herman Miller, was with Charles and Ray in the New York showroom of Herman Miller, and apparently somebody made the mistake of saying good design, and Charles heard it. And Charles said, "Don't give us that good design crap. You never hear us talk about that. The real questions are, does it solve a problem? Is it serviceable? How is it going to look in 10 years? and I hope this will come out as we do our tour and as you look around, that's what they were thinking about. The next idea comes from the Eames design process diagram, which many of you are probably familiar with. I particularly like the words. Charles, for an exhibition at the Louvre called What is Design, drew his idea of the design process. So this is the area of interest and concern to the design office, things that Charles and Ray wanted to work on. This, the area of genuine interest to the client, and for many years for furniture, the client was Herman Miller. And then this, the concerns of society as a whole. And here Charles and Ray distinguished themselves from many, many designers, that they didn't do anything without also thinking about the concerns of society as a whole. And I think that'll come clear as we look through this, and I'll give you a specific example. And then the third and last big idea of today is why this exhibition is really about jobs creation. So we collected the material and we displayed the material the way Charles and Ray designed. And what makes this collection unique in all the world is that Charles and Ray improved things constantly. And we have designs from 1939 up to 2011, all authentic Eames designs. And back when I was assembling the first 175, what fascinated me, and I think what connected me to Charles and Ray, is how much they thought about me and you. So they were always improved. I think we've all had that experience, like we buy a nice shirt and then the next year they don't make it as well anymore. With Charles and Ray, they made a wood chair, and then year by year they kept improving it. And they didn't think about how it would look, they thought about how it would function. John mentioned this chair, very exciting to get to see this. I think this is a chair that changed chair design history if you look in the design books. But Charles and Eames-Saarinen weren't trying to change design history. They were trying to make a really good, affordable, lightweight chair. And this incredible piece is really lightweight. And Charles always said that they took an architectural solution to chair design, and that means things like keeping materials to a minimum. The big innovation here was they thought if they could mold a one-piece arm shell in a way that was comfortable, then you didn't need all of the heavy foam and padding and springs that made chairs comfortable up until then. This was actually the design on which Charles met Ray, who became his wife. She was a student at Cranbrook, and she helped with the design of this. They learned a really big lesson in doing this, which is don't design from drawings. They won first prize with a drawing of this, and then when they were sent to Haywood Wakefield said, "What, are you kidding? We can't mold plywood like that." And in fact, that's why it's covered with this prize-winning fabric. The fabric's by Marley Ehrman, who is a Bauhaus refugee, and she won first prize in the same competition, the organic design competition for weaves. And when you study Eames, you see a series of frantic letters between Charles and Eames-Saarinen and MoMA saying, "What are we going to do? Haywood Wakefield can't mold things like this." And the solution was cover it with fabric. But it's a lesson that Charles and Ray applied, because they never again designed by drawing things. An interesting thing, an idea that I want to share with you is that Charles and Ray were material agnostic. They never set out to make a plywood chair. They chose plywood in this instance because it was inexpensive and strong, and it seemed to be something they could mold. 9 years after winning a prize with this, they won a prize for that chair, the plastic chair. And MoMA, in their exhibition, the low-cost furniture competition exhibition of 1950, correctly said of that chair, and I think you can see it through this juxtaposition, that this was the astonishing fulfillment of the promise made by this chair. And a couple things that kind of illustrates that they were material agnostic. First, they tried molding a one-piece shell, arm shell in wood. They did that in steel in 1949, and they found that steel was really expensive. They had to coat it in neoprene to make it consumer friendly, and then they turned to molded plastic. But they didn't set out to make a plastic chair. They were the need was still the same: comfortable, low-cost furniture that would last forever. And there was one experience I had that led me to start to understand Charles and Ray. I interviewed Ron Frank, who's a Long Beach retailer of furniture, Frank Brothers, some of you may have heard of. And I said, you know, Frank Brothers had been selling wood furniture and for many years. They'd been selling wood Eames chairs from 1946 to 1950. And I asked him, what was it like when you got a plastic chair? And Ron said, well, what are you talking about? And I said, well, you've been selling wood furniture, and now you're asking your customers to buy something made out of plastic. And Ron said, it wasn't a plastic chair, it was an Eames chair. Our timeline. So the timeline goes from 1939 for architectural interest. Eames-Saarinen did the Kleinhans Music Hall. This is a real chair done by Charles and Ray for the Kleinhans Music Hall. And you can you see the hands of not just an architectural approach to chair design, but really superior architects. It's the first time that they molded plywood. They did this one-piece shell for Kleinhans, and then these architectural supports. You all know so much about the molded plywood. I won't spend too much time on it, other than maybe to share some things that you hadn't thought about. This is a very cool pair, and it illustrates a few Eames ideas. First of all, I like to think this is a museum exhibition, but museums probably wouldn't embrace this idea of showing people that these things were not made to be put on pedestals. This was a pair of chairs that were used by people. From the details, I can tell you these examples were made in 1947, all original parts. And you start to see this idea: how is it going to look in 10 years? It looks great after 50 years, because they considered that. And one thing they did was they thought people would like red chairs maybe in some interiors. Well, let's not do an applied finish. They did a dye, because dye doesn't chip, and over the years it just sort of ages nicely. They also felt that honesty in design was good. If it's a wood chair, let people see it's wood, and you can see that in the red. Stepping out of the timeline, another really nifty thing for architectural historians to see. This is from the Crow Island School in Winnetka, Illinois, which was another job in the architecture firm of Saarinen and Saarinen. And Charles and Ray collaborated on the tables and on the chairs. And this is the holy grail. I was thinking of offering a reward of $5,000 or $10,000, because no one has turned this up yet. That's a real Eames-Saarinen chair from 1939. Thanks to the Chens, you can see a real table. And I think you see the handiwork of really talented architects in this. The proportions are jewel-like in this table. And they thought about students. They thought students are going to try to scratch their initials in the table. So they put this, they found this sturdy material. And you can see from the period photos, this is an all original table. Solid wood here, solid wood there, and really beautifully proportioned. If you go to Eamesdesigns.com, you'll see that what I was talking about, that each of these chairs year by year got tweaked by Charles and Ray in some fashion that made it a better consumer product. This is outside of the timeline again, a great opportunity to see the Eames compact storage system of 1961. And I've found that if you want to understand Charles and Ray, if you look at product literature that came out of the Eames office, it says it best, very straightforward. ECS is a system of storage, sleeping, and study units designed to meet the extraordinary requirements of the dormitory. And this is the piece of which Charles and Ray wrote the immortal lines: "The details are not the details, they make the product." They said that about this piece. I don't think there's better furnishing for a dormitory than this. The beds fold up, and this system, which was made in 1961, is still fully functioning, so the students have more floor room. They came up with this, I don't know about you, but I've always been frustrated by the idea of nightstands, and you put a lamp on it and you knock it over. How are you going to read in bed? Charles and Ray addressed that handily. This student has a light above his bed. This student has a light above this bed. And one of the things you find with Charles and Ray is how deeply they thought about the users and all types of users, not just the students. They thought, you know, students have smelly socks, so they made the system with mesh. They put industrial strength rubber on the mesh drawers. And even though the students managed to put stickers all over this, there's no sign of wear on the mesh. They thought about the housekeeping staff, that students might throw stale pizza underneath it. There's plenty of clearance to sweep out whatever students might throw underneath. Another remarkable thing, and again, kudos to the Chens, I acquired this in pieces, and I had no way to assemble it and no way to install it. I gave Joel a 30-page instruction manual. His staff didn't need that, and they put this up in 4 hours. And it's a rare double unit. Oh, another thing about the details, these are solid cast handles. And you know, the hinges are great. You know, they made industrial strength things, not because industrial was a good thing, but because they thought college students deserve things that don't break, don't wear out, and are highly functional. Continuing along the timeline, we touched on the plastic chair of 1950. In 1951, Charles and Ray were always pushing to do more and more for consumers and more for the users. And they had made wood chairs, they had done it in plastic, and they noticed that there were a lot of good things made out of steel wire. And they didn't think steel wire was some nifty substance. They thought steel wire is strong and lightweight, it's plentiful, it's humble, and they did this steel wire chair. And in trying to gain real insight into what they were thinking with steel wire, you look at this example. This is a pair made in 1951, and it has features that confirm that when you get into Eames scholarship, and you'll see this on Eames designs, you can tell by different configurations when it was made. This was a pair made in 1951. They were obviously used, and they're still in great shape. But here's the breakthrough. It's a comfortable, low lounge chair that weighs 14 pounds. That's why they went to steel wire. And you're free to sit on this or anything in the exhibition. Some people have heard about the bikini chair. Charles and Ray didn't set out to make a bikini chair. When they were doing steel wire, they realized that the steel should have a pad, and they did a one-piece upholstered pad. And when they looked at what the consumer cost was, they thought, well, let's see if we can do better. So they looked at this one-piece pad and thought, how much can we remove? And I think this is very much an architectural idea. And they removed enough so that the chair was still comfortable. But the result was that if you bought with the one-piece pad, it was $29. And with the two-piece pad, which collectors like to call the bikini pad, it was $22. Moving right along. Oh, Ice Cube's video and poster. This is the very chair that Ice Cube is sitting in the poster. And on another pillar, you can see the original Charles photograph that Ice Cube was inspired to recreate. And I love what Ice Cube said. He kind of sums up the Eameses very well. The Eames were masters of sampling. They took existing materials, mixed them into something greater, and served their designs up to the people. Ice Cube clearly understands Charles and Ray. I got a phone call from the Eames office, and the Getty wanted to recreate this, and I explained this is a very rare chair. And it's the first time that the Eameses made a chair with a contract base. First time they worked with cast aluminum. But they, at first when they would do things in terms of sourcing existing things, I was very excited to find out, because they were, every time I read the word innovation in the press today, I get creeped out because of studying Eames designs. The casters on this chair were designed in 1929. Charles and Ray felt like you shouldn't deny consumers the very best of something. And they, why should we design a caster? There's a really great caster out there. This tilt swivel mechanism they sourced from a company called Basic. And when they did it at first, they put this very simple but cast steel turn mechanism on it. A 1954 molded plywood chair. When you start to really drill down in Eames chairs, you'll see, year by year they kept coming up with features to improve them. Architectural point, this is a very exciting thing to see. This is a site-specific piece of Eames seating. This was done for the 1964 IBM Pavilion at the World's Fair. I don't know when you'll ever get a chance to see this again, but you see the architect's hand at work. One of the things that I think Charles got from architecture was that people, when they look at a design, should know what all the parts are for. This is clearly the back, this is clearly the seat. Architects today seem to not think about that anymore. Like, I still don't know where the entrance to the Getty is. Obviously, these parts support the back. The remarkable thing about this is all original condition. This sat outdoors in the open air, 1964 and 1965 in New York City, and this is what it looks like. As you go along, and again, I refer you to Eamesdesigns.com. This is the second use of aluminum by the Eames office. I mentioned that if you want to understand Eames design, see what Charles and Ray said. They didn't say this was a nifty, keen base. They said this has a great weight-strength ratio to it. And I have seen many, many chairs. Collectors like to call this the cat's cradle base. And this example is from '57. It doesn't break, and it's a comfortable lounge chair that weighs 8 pounds. Early examples of the Eames aluminum group. I don't want to get too detailed. It's too easy for me to spend hours talking to you about this. Some fun stories about the Eames speaker. Culver City Company, Stevens Trusonic, was bought by friends of Charles and Ray, and they like to do things for friends because they felt any designer is going to do his best work if he's really motivated, that he likes it and his friend likes it, the public could use it. And I think that the Eameses were a little frustrated that they weren't asked to redesign sound. And what Charles said about this in an interview was, this is an example of the best we could do between now and Tuesday. And then he said, but still, that's a kind of best you can do. But all they were asked to do was to do the speaker enclosure. And I found this 1957 interview with Charles. They did 4 speaker enclosures for Stevens, and Charles said this was his favorite. And you think, is it his favorite because it's so beautiful? Oh, by the way, a little provenance note. This came from the personal collection of Oscar winner Saul Bass, who did the shower sequence in Psycho. Anyway, so Charles said this was his favorite. And he didn't say it was his favorite because it looked really cool. And this gives you a big insight into Charles. He said it was his favorite because, well, 2 things. When they were hired for this job, they asked the engineers a lot of questions, and Charles said, what's the speaker cloth for? And the engineers said, well, that's to keep people from poking their hands through the paper cone. So Charles said, yeah, but why are you putting woven cloth here? So they said, what should we put? And Charles said, well, there's this great plastic upholstery that's used in automobiles, and this is the first time the Eameses used this material called Sarin, because he said it won't be as much of a dust collector. But then they went one step further. What Charles said was his favorite feature of this speaker was that you can pop this off, which meant that if after 20 years somebody poked their hand through the plastic cloth, which is very hard to do. Here, this is the second one. I've never seen one of these in which anyone succeeded in puncturing this plastic cloth. But should that happen after 20 years, Charles was very proud of the fact that with just a little pressure, this pops off, you can put a new piece of cloth there. But Charles didn't say this, but I will tell you there's another thing that makes this Eamesian. It has radius edges, and you see that in almost all the Eames designs, and it has radius edges because radius edges are people-friendly. If late at night you're walking through your apartment and you bump into this thing because it's a radius edge, it'll hurt less. And you also see radius edges on their famous 670 chair. And if you doubt that this is a user-friendly chair, 2 things. Go on Eamesdesigns.com, search for the word bucket, and you'll see a 3-year-old playing unsupervised with one of these, because a 3-year-old won't hurt himself on this because of these radius edges. Charles and Ray knew what they were doing. This is the first piece of product literature, and it came out of the Eames office for the chair. And there's two messages that Charles and Ray want customers to see. It's human-friendly. They put a little girl sitting on it. And the other thing is, big Eames idea, easily replaceable, easily repairable parts. You will never see on an Eames design no user-serviceable parts. The message of this product literature, and they worked with Sister Corita Kent on this. She did the calligraphy. The message of this is, if you buy this lounge chair, well, first of all, it's comfortable. Another thing is an architectural idea, it pivots. And if after 30 or 40 years one part wears out, you can easily repair it or replace it yourself. All of these parts are still available from Herman Miller. You can replace the shell, and you can do it yourself. It's very simply put together. Charles and Ray didn't design things to be put on pedestals, so you see a lot of complete sets at this show. Going through the timeline, people ask me all the time, what are rare Eames chairs? And I like them to understand that rarity has nothing to do with age. People assume that a 1940s Eames chair is rare and covetable. This is a 1968 Eames chair, and it's one of the rarest. And it's rare because Charles and Ray were acutely sensitive to feedback. They made this chair, and they discovered that because of various construction features, it cost a lot to do. And 1 year later, they came out with the soft pad group, and they did a medium height version of this, so they took this out of production. Since 1987, I've seen fewer than 6 of these chairs. Architectural thing, these were originally done for the lobby of the Time Life building. And these have the rare early base. In terms of how is it going to look in 10 years, this example is dated 1979. I dare say it looks better. Eames Chaise, in terms of an architectural solution, it's pretty clear there's a membrane that supports this. This is still made in the same way that it was made, the same molds that were designed in Venice, California at the Eames office are still used by Herman Miller in Michigan to make this chair. Up until the last minute, Charles and Ray had a 24-inch model and an 18-inch model in their offices, and people were pressing them to do the 24-inch one. And being architects, it's like, I don't know, maybe we don't need to take up that much volume. And Charles climbed onto the 18-inch one, and he summoned Ray. Charles was tall and thin, Ray short and not so thin. And he held on to Ray, and the two of them hung off the 18-inch one like saddlebags, but they didn't fall down, and Charles and Ray said 18 inches is wide enough. This was inspired, it's a machine for napping, by the way. You get on it and cross your arms and go to sleep, and without an alarm and without anybody waking you up, when your arms fall to your side, you wake up. They got the idea from film director Billy Wilder, who liked to take naps on narrow planks, so he could do that nap thing. And when Billy heard they were doing this, he said, don't make it such that people think that it's a casting couch. So it was another purpose served by the 18 inches. So I promised you that I would talk about jobs. These are authentic Eames designs, and these were made in Michigan 2 months ago. And they've been made since 1961. They're made out of American black walnut, and they're made by American workers who get paid enough to send their kids to college. And that's true of all but one chair in this room. All of these things were made in America by American workers who got really good wages doing this. And that's something that Charles and Ray thought about. They thought about the workers on the assembly line. And that's one of the reasons they picked Herman Miller, because their values were the same as Herman Miller's. These chairs, I think the retail price is $900, but this will last for 250 years. It looks like sculpture. Charles and Ray weren't thinking about sculpture. They thought if we're going to make a stool, it'd be nice if it works this way. It'd be nice if it works this way. And instead of thinking about sculpture, Ray said, what we thought was we need to make this deep enough so it's comfortable to sit on, but not so deep that you can't put a cup of coffee there. And the job creation ideas, I think if designers of today would devote their attention to things that could be made in America by American workers, and companies could make a profit off of it, and consumers would get chairs that don't wear out, I think that our economic problems would start to be addressed. In terms of this organic design chair, Charles said, when I imagined that the furniture makers knew how to make this design, and if I had known that they didn't, I wouldn't have designed it this way. So that's why they devoted themselves to figuring out how to make their designs and how to make them by workers who could get well paid. You can buy a new Eames rocking chair made in America, plastic armchair just like this, for under $500. And those workers send their kids to college. And I think more companies should do that. And more designers should do that instead of making buildings out of titanium. So everything on this yellow, very tastefully designed floor covering belonged to the Valastro family. And Sal and Gladys Valastro got married in 1954, and they took their wedding dowry money, $2,500, and they bought furniture, and this is what they bought. And it was used continuously, all these pieces, by the Valastros from 1954 to 2009. Now, Joel Chen has 37 years of experience as an antique dealer, and you can't put anything past Joel. He has a very, very good eye. And first of all, he was brave enough to buy this collection and bring it here from upstate New York. And when it arrived, he called me and he said, Dan, the knobs have been replaced. And I thought about that, and I called the sons of Sal and Gladys, Ken and James Valastro, and I said, tell me about the knobs. And they said, well, in the 1970s, we needed to replace the knobs, which means after 20 years of use, and let's look at what those 20 years of use were. Sal and Gladys got married in 1954. They had 2 boys in 55 and 56. So after 20 years of 2 little boys pulling on these knobs, the knobs broke and had to be replaced. Herman Miller was no longer making this particular configuration in the 1970s, so Sal Valastro had to very tastefully replace the knobs. On this one, the knobs are all original. I think Sal did a very nice job. I think Charles and Ray, this is what they were talking about, easily repairable, easily replaceable parts. Another family of 4 could buy this and use it for the next 50 years, and it would still be great. And I told Joel, and I did a little book about this, which I think of as a design manifesto, that the replaced knobs are the best part of this because everything else is all original. All the finishes are all original. 2 little boys and a family of 4, 6 homes, 3 states use this coffee table, and it still looks great. Charles and Ray, they didn't like applied finishes, so you see what it means when you dye wood instead of putting a finish, that after 50 years it kind of looks better. The finish on the wood chairs is all original. I think this is what Charles and Ray were working towards. They weren't working towards the elite. They were looking to make things this for the best for the most for the least amount of money, and this is what they were talking about. And it's very fun to share this for you so you can see it in context this way. And that concludes my talk. Oh.